Hello, today I'm going to be talking you through The Little Boy Lost and The Little Boy Found in Songs of Innocence for Blake's collection of poetry. And these are going to be the last two poems that we study in conjunction with Songs of Innocence. Now, just to address from the title themselves, there is that overwhelming link between the little girl lost and the little girl found. However, I do feel that those two parallel poems present a more optimistic message about sexual freedom, maturity, and actually a connection with God, whereas The Little Boy Lost and Found appears to be slightly darker in its content. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to give you a bit of a summary into both of the poems and the the narrator's point of view, and then I'm going to zoom in on particular words and phrases that I think are interesting for further study. So, Father, Father, where are you going? Oh, do not walk so fast. Speak, Father, speak to your little boy, or else I shall be lost. So we start this stanza, and it seems to be very simplistic in the explicit meaning here. We're learning that a young boy is lost as we're soon to understand, in the mire. So that means it's sort of a location where it's almost quite boggy. It's sort of wet and low ground, which is prone to flooding. So that's obviously going to be significant in a moment. So if we can see that desperation for the little boy to have that rapport with his father, who seems to be walking so fast. He doesn't appear to be having any concern for his son, and he doesn't want to end up finding him and kind of caring, supporting him. The night was dark, no father was there. The child was wet with dew, the mire was deep, and the child did weep, and away the vapour flew. So the little boy is lost through into the evening, no sign of his father there. And there's this repetition of the imagery associated with darkness, with idea of sinking in there as well, and the water. But then the vapour flew. So we need to look at that word vapour as well. So we start off then with the child who is narrating. And if we compare these two poems with other child narrators in this collection of poetry, it appears to be quite compressed. It's much shorter. So that's something for you to think about for the reason for that. And we could argue that this child begging for its father, its sort of earthly father, is actually an allegory for the soul, which is begging for God's guidance through a world of sin and a world of experience, which I'll come on to in a bit more detail. So we see here the first word that's used in this poem is father. It's repeated twice, so there is that sense of pleading for that sort of fatherly rapport and connection. But one thing to question is Blake referring to his earthly father as well as the divine father of God. So who is it here that he's actually pleading for? So where are you going? This little boy is completely lost. And what's also interesting as well is that, as we know, alongside all of Blake's poems, there is also engravings and pictures to coincide with them. Now, in the particular engraving for this poem, there isn't actually a father who is represented in it. So once again, this could be representing the absence there. So, oh, do not walk so fast. Here it's presented as just the singular capitalised O, but in our own anthologies it's OH. So it once again is just that sort of almost unable to put into words the real grief that this little boy is going through, because he doesn't have the emotional capacity in trying to validate how he's feeling. So it's just kind of coming out in sounds. And we can see here that through that pleading, speak, Father, speak to your little boy, there is even the imperative verbs here, that sense of urgency that he feels to be cared for and looked after. Whereas the father, by contrast, is seeming to be very uncaring. And happily leading his son into a world of experience and happy to abandon him there, which is in contrast to the little girl lost, because her parents were always part of her journey, whether they were warning her against this or whether they were actually, at the end of it, sort of creating their own understanding and connection with the lion or with God. So completely lost, completely alone. So as I've already touched on, we have references to the darkness now. So this could be the dangerous world of experience. So it's also interesting to think about the inherent fear that is experienced by lots of children growing up, and that's the fear of the darkness, the fear of nighttime, this primitive fear. So therefore, perhaps emphasizing just how alarming this experience is for the little boy, and no father was there. So, but then one thing we could question is, well, is there a father there, but maybe the boy is deluded? Maybe he just can't have a kind of strong enough connection with him, or is it the fact that he is completely absent? The child was wet with dew, so it's almost like this boy has a fear of sinking, a fear of kind of going under the earth and not actually being able to create a positive experience in his own world and actually on his path into heaven in the future. The mire was deep, so once again this repeated idea of sinking and entrapment in there. So it's almost like the little boy here is completely innocent in his attitude and his genuine fears, rather than the environment causing that sense of experience for him. So he always maintains his innocence here. And away the vapour flew. So as soon as the child weeps, the vapour flies away. Now this word vapour is an interesting one. So is it the idea that he has a sense of clarity and has his own sort of epiphany or revelation? Or is it that the vapour kind of clouds his own innocent mindset and therefore kind of leads him onto this path of deception? Or is it the fact that the vapour has completely obscured his own view of life and the support network he had around him, that he doesn't quite even know who he is anymore? So there is that sense of obscurity, there is that kind of ambiguous ending to this poem. So whatever way you want to read it really, is it this revelation or is it actually a reference to the clouding obscurity again? One other thing to note about the form of these poems, and as we know, Blake adopts a very simplistic rhyme scheme, but what's particularly interesting for these two poems is, what I'm going to outline here, it has an A, B, C, B rhyme scheme. So what I mean by that is that the second and fourth lines of each stanza rhyme. But if you look at the first stanza, it's sort of a half rhyme between fast and lost. They're not direct rhymes of each other, so therefore we call them para rhymes or half rhymes. So maybe it's like the relationship that the little boy has with his own sense of identity and understanding doesn't fully fit. He has not fully navigated himself in this world, whereas dew and flew is, more of a rhyme there. So there is an obvious jarring between fast and lost. So to continue on with the analysis of the rhyme there, that second stanza would be D, E, F, E. So the E is the dew and the flew, which can really emphasises how those two are similar. So as we move on to the little boy found them, the little boy lost in the lonely fen, led by the wandering light, began to cry, but God, ever nigh, appeared like his father in white. So it appears that this little boy is still out in a fen. So the fen, similar to the word mire, is a very low, marshy type land. So it's presume that he's been out there all night, but he has been led by wandering light. So is that wandering light an angel? Is it God reaching out to him? Or is it the vapour? Because vapour obviously has that sort of atmospheric, quite ethereal quality to it. And because of this arrival, he began to cry, "But God ever nigh." So God is always there to protect the little boy, and appeared like his father in white. He kissed the child, and by the hand led, and to his mother brought, who in sorrow pale through the lonely dale, her little boy weeping sought. So we have the arrival of God here, who appears to kind of assert some order and comfort in the little boy's life, and actually is able to redirect him with his maternal figure of his mother. And then the weeping stops and he's safe, in safe hands. So highlighted here the reference to obviously the fact that he is lost. And I think I asked you as one of the reflective questions to perhaps consider a time that you've been lost in your life, whether that be literally or metaphorically, and actually what the repercussions of that feeling are. I think often when we think about being lost, we worry about the fear of being recovered and safe again. And I think that Blake does ultimately offer his readers comfort in this poem, because the little boy is recovered with his mother and God by his side. But it makes you wonder if those two forces, spiritual forces, hadn't have intervened, well, predominantly God, would he have been lost in a dangerous world of experience? So is there a particular reason why this boy could not go back to his father's side? Because maybe his father's world is one that is full of sin, and therefore he would have been permanently lost in this state. Whereas Blake is offering a different alternative to the boy's life here, because he is reassuring him that his human soul, whilst it might have been temporarily lost on his path to navigate his own identity, he's ultimately been rescued by God. And there is that sort of that sense of comfort there that, you know, God is in a human form. He is there to reassure us and to guide us in those moments that we could become lost. But ultimately, it's the sort of optimistic ending that we kind of need for songs of innocence, or you would hope for anyway. So if I have a look at some of the interesting ideas here, I've already touched on the wandering light being, you know, a message from God himself or the angels. The little boy again is prompted to cry because he's shocked and overwhelmed by some of the undergoings in this experience. But God is ever nigh. So this idea that God is always going to be near, and therefore truth and safety is never far to find. And it's interesting that he's appeared in white. So there's this traditional imagery of God that is used by Blake here. So this idea that God is the Holy Father. That whiteness evocative of the purity and the innocence felt by, or we would associate naturally with God. And by the hand led, so it's almost like God here is not a distant and remote figure in the little boy's life, but one that is ever present in human form, and there is that physical contact between the two of them rather than a spiritual one, and trying to find that path spiritually with God. He's there physically helping and guides the little boy to his mother. So therefore it's interesting that the mother is compared to being in sorrow pale. So therefore it's almost like the mother or the adult has to have some sense of sympathy for these conditions, but they can be brought about by delusions about the world. So what I mean by that is that when the mother has obviously gone on her own individual path of experience, it's important to think about the repercussions that this has on the younger children growing up. And she is there in her lonely dale as well, going out to meet him. So she's kind of getting herself away from the world of experience, entering the world of innocence to meet with her son, and then his weeping stops. So it's almost like the child here, just he's not ready for his journey into experience. And the mother is definitely presented in contrast to the father, and her belief in the necessity for his world of innocence. She wants to sort of maintain that for him. So a final sort of reflection on this poem then is that it's almost like from the offset, this little boy, he's pursuing something unreal. He's trying to follow the path of his father into the world of experience, and in doing so ends up lost because he's just not ready for that. But rather than being lost forever in this world of sin, he is recovered by God in a very physical form, through the human form, which we know that Blake is an advocate for, the human form of God, and therefore it's almost like an allegory for the spiritual life, which can sometimes go wrong if we are pursuing things that are unreal, like power, money, riches. Then if that becomes everything that we're focused on, that's when things can go wrong, and actually we need that physical sort of, pressure and connection with the world in order to steer us away from that.